My wife publicly humiliated me after her promotion. Aren't you confident enough to be with a strong woman? She laughed while I paid all the bills until I quietly divided everything, walked away, and reclaimed my freedom. When my wife said she didn't need me, I believed her and let her try it alone. It was during our wedding anniversary dinner that I first noticed the change. What should have been a celebration of our journey together ended up becoming a moment when I understood our paths were diverging. "I don't need you to order for me," she retorted when I suggested her favorite wine. "I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions." The friends at the table shifted uncomfortably, their gazes darting from one to the other as an awkward silence settled in. That night was just the beginning. In the following months, these declarations of independence became more frequent and increasingly public. She'd interrupt me during conversations, correct what I said, and make it clear that my opinion was neither necessary nor welcome, but nothing compared to the fateful dinner last month that pushed me to the edge. We were hosting 4 couples, colleagues from her new job at the marketing agency where she had recently been promoted. She was excited to impress them, and I had spent hours helping prepare an elaborate dinner. As I served the main course, I heard what she was saying in the living room. Wine glass in hand. "My husband, oh, he's just in the kitchen. I'll let him handle the food, since he's had more time on his hands lately." She laughed, even though I was working 60 hours a week, while she maintained a standard 9 to 5 schedule. Between us, marriage is just a piece of paper. I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need him for anything. The words hit like a physical impact. I stood paralyzed in the kitchen, spoon in hand, while the group laughed along with her. In that instant, something inside me changed. That wasn't an isolated comment. It was the culmination of a new pattern. The respect that had been the foundation of our relationship had transformed into something unrecognizable. Later that night, after everyone had left and she was asleep without even thanking me for dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I reflected on how everything had changed since her promotion 6 months earlier. The gratitude and partnership that marked our early years had been replaced by a strange competitiveness. It wasn't just empowerment. I always supported her career and ambitions. This was different. She seemed to believe her success required minimizing me. I thought about our shared finances, how my name was on most of the mortgage and car payments, how I covered our health plan through my job, how I supported her through graduate school just 3 years before. Despite her proclamations of independence, the reality was much more interconnected. The next morning over coffee, I tried to talk about how her comments had made me feel. "You're being too sensitive," she dismissed, barely looking up from her phone. "It was just party talk. Besides, aren't you secure enough to deal with a strong woman?" Before I could answer, she was already out the door, reminding me we needed to buy groceries and that the credit card bill was due. It was at that moment that I knew this wasn't a difficult phase or something that would pass. The woman I had married, the partner who once valued and respected our union, was gone. In her place was someone who wanted all the benefits of the partnership while publicly denying its importance. I made no dramatic announcements, didn't slam doors, or give ultimatums. Instead, I began to devise a plan bit by bit. If she truly believed she was completely independent of me, maybe it was time for her to experience what that really meant, not out of revenge, but as a reality check that seemed necessary for both of us. The transformation had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first. 3 years ago, she'd call me on her lunch breaks just to hear my voice. We'd spend our evenings cooking together, planning the future, discussing our dreams. Back then, we were true partners. Her victories were mine, and mine were hers. I clearly remember the night of the promotion. We celebrated with champagne on our building's balcony. She had tears in her eyes as she thanked me for supporting her through the long hours and stressful projects. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her hands clasped in mine. It was the last time I heard those words. In a few weeks, our dynamic changed. The first changes were subtle. She started rejecting my calls during the day, saying she was too busy for trivial chats. Our nightly conversations about her work went from excited to filled with irritated sighs when I asked questions. "You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under," became the standard response. even though I also held an executive position. Then came the financial signs. Despite the substantial raise, her contributions to our joint account remained the same while expensive packages arrived daily. Designer clothes, premium cosmetics, status symbols for the new office. When I carefully mentioned the increase in expenses, she got irritated. I earned this money, I deserve to enjoy it. Our social life suffered the most dramatic change. Friends we had known for years were gradually replaced by her new colleagues, people who knew nothing about me beyond what she chose to tell. And what she told, I discovered, was a carefully constructed fiction. I was alternately portrayed as needy, professionally stagnant, or simply irrelevant. 6 weeks after the dinner incident, I found myself sitting in our home office reviewing our accounts. The mortgage payment had just been paid in full from my personal resources, as had been happening for 3 months, ever since she forgot to transfer her share. The joint credit card showed expenses at restaurant for lunches I hadn't participated in with tips that suggested she wasn't lunching alone. That night, she came home late, bringing the unmistakable scent of an unknown cologne. "Work dinner," she explained without me asking, taking off her heels and going straight to the shower. I said nothing, but made a mental note to check her schedule the next day. The next morning, after she left for work, I confirmed my suspicions. There was no team dinner scheduled. That wasn't the first lie, but somehow crystallized everything. This wasn't just about her new independence. It was a fundamental breach of trust. I spent that afternoon making calls, first to a lawyer, then to a real estate agent, and finally to the bank. I wasn't acting on impulse or emotion. It was the calculated response of someone who had spent months watching the deterioration of what was once the most important relationship of his life. That weekend, while she was on a team-building retreat, although the location app showed she was at a lakeside resort known for its romantic accommodations, I opened a new bank account. I calculated exactly half of our joint assets and transferred that amount, not a penny more or less. I was fair, meticulously fair. I didn't want anyone, not even her, to be able to claim that I had acted dishonorably while working. Photos of our life together looked at me. Had she really changed that much? Or was she always this person just waiting for the right circumstances to emerge? I couldn't be sure. All I knew was that the woman now, wearing my ring, was unrecognizable compared to the one who had accepted it with tears 5 years earlier. As I closed the spreadsheet detailing our separate finances, a message appeared on my phone. "Don't wait up." Continuing the conversations, having drinks. No term of endearment. No expected time of return. Just another casual dismissal from someone who once valued every moment by my side. "I'm not going to wait," I whispered to the empty house. In fact, I no longer had any intention of waiting for anything. Planning my exit required precision and discretion. With each passing day, her indifference made my preparations easier. She barely noticed my movements, too absorbed in her phone or laptop to notice my prolonged absences or late-night searches. I became a ghost in my own home, silently orchestrating my departure while she remained oblivious to the approaching reality. My first step was to secure a place to live. Through a colleague who owed me a favor, I found a furnished apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and available immediately, no questions asked. I paid 3 months' rent in advance in cash, ensuring there was no paper trail that would alert her ahead of time. The keys felt heavy in my pocket, a tangible reminder that I was crossing a line from which there would be no return. Then came the legal consultation. The lawyer listened patiently as I described our situation, nodding occasionally as I detailed the gradual dissolution of our partnership. "This isn't unusual," she said, organizing documents on her desk. "But most people wait until the relationship becomes unbearable." I explained that I wasn't interested in drama or retaliation, just a clean break that honored what our marriage had once been, not what it had become. The paperwork was simple. Fortunately, we had no children, which simplified things greatly. The division of assets would be relatively smooth. I only wanted what was indisputably mine. The retirement accounts and investments required more attention, but even those could be divided based on contributions. I signed the preliminary documents. to be finalized later, and save copies in a secure cloud account she didn't have access to. The financial separation ended up being the most complex aspect. Over the course of 3 weeks, I methodically transferred my direct deposits to a new account at a different bank. I kept just enough in the joint accounts to avoid raising suspicion, while ensuring I wouldn't be left vulnerable when I finally left. The credit cards were canceled and replaced. The automatic payments for my personal expenses were redirected, and I even set up a separate cell phone plan that would activate on my departure date. Throughout this process, her declarations of independence continued, each one further reinforcing my resolve. During a weekend brunch with her new friends, she proclaimed loudly how she was the one holding the relationship together while I was just drifting along. When I received a significant bonus for a project the following week, she suggested I use it to finally contribute something meaningful to our savings. The same savings I'd been maintaining alone for 6 months. The night before her planned weekend trip with colleagues, I witnessed the culmination of her transformation. She was packing new, very expensive suitcases, still with the tags on, carelessly dropping receipts that revealed purchases far above the budget she claimed to have. When I picked one up, the amount made me flinch. "Do we need to talk about spending?" I asked quietly. She snatched the receipt from my hand. "Don't police me like I'm a child. I deserve this trip. Besides, the month's bills are paid, aren't they?" "Yes," I confirmed, without mentioning I had paid them in full with my own money for 3 consecutive months. "Then there's no problem," she concluded, going back to packing. "While I'm away, could you finally fix that dripping faucet I asked you about weeks ago?" I agreed, though we both knew she had never mentioned it before. As she continued to organize her designer outfits, I noticed how she avoided my gaze in the mirror. Was there a flicker of guilt there, or just impatience to get away from me? That night, she slept soundly while I lay awake, mentally reviewing my final checklist. My essential belongings were already at the new apartment. The important documents were in safekeeping. The financial transitions were complete. All that remained was the departure itself and the letter I had written and rewritten a dozen times. In the morning, I prepared her favorite breakfast, a final gesture of what was once genuine affection. She ate hurriedly, checking her phone between bites. "I'll be back Sunday night," she said, gathering her things. "Don't wait up." I watched her rush out, without a look back or a goodbye kiss. Another small death of what we once shared. The sound of the car engine fading down the street seemed like the curtain closing on the final act of a play that had gone on for too long. Now I just took one last walk through the house that had been our home. Each room held memories of better days, promises made and kept before everything changed. I allowed myself exactly 30 minutes of nostalgia before beginning the final stage of my plan. The time for preparation was over. The time for action had arrived. The house seemed different the instant I committed to leaving it behind. Objects that once seemed permanent now seemed temporary. Like stage props, I went through each room with methodical precision, gathering the last of my personal belongings, things whose absence she wouldn't notice immediately, but that held great meaning for me. My grandfather's watch, my father's leather-bound journal, photos from before I met her. I worked efficiently, having rehearsed this process mentally countless times. The few remaining clothes went into a single suitcase. The important documents were already in my briefcase. I left behind everything we had bought together, including wedding gifts still in use. Those weren't just objects, they were symbols of shared life I was now renouncing. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows as I sat at the dining table, pen in hand, facing the blank sheet in front of me. How to summarize the end of 8 years in a few paragraphs. I had already written and discarded dozens of versions of that letter. Too much anger, too much guilt, too many details, too vague. Finally, I wrote from a place of calm and clarity. I have respected your repeated declarations of independence and am now honoring them completely. Our joint accounts have been divided equally. The mortgage and utility bills are paid through the end of the month, giving you time to get organized. My personal belongings have been removed. I will not be back. The woman I married valued partnership, mutual respect, and shared dreams. That woman seems to no longer exist. I wish you all the best. If necessary, you can contact me through my lawyer. The information is attached. No accusations, no dramatic explanations, just a simple acknowledgement of the reality you had been building for months. A reality in which I was unnecessary and unwanted. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter, where she would see it immediately upon her return. My wedding ring was deliberately placed next to it. The last task was the most difficult. I walked slowly through the house one more time, this time to say goodbye. The living room where we spent countless nights planning the future. The kitchen where we danced while making dinner. The bedroom where we whispered dreams to each other in the dark. Each space held echoes of the relationship we built and that she slowly dismantled. At the front door, I stopped to disable the security system and remove the house key from my keychain. The small brass key seemed absurdly heavy in my hand, a tiny object representing all that I was leaving behind. With deliberate care, I placed the copy on the hall table, a final surrender of my place in that house. The click of the front door closing behind me was anticlimactic given the magnitude of the moment. No dramatic soundtrack accompanied my steps down the sidewalk. No sudden rain marked the emotional weight of my departure. Just the ordinary sounds of a Saturday afternoon. Children playing in the street, a neighbor mowing the lawn, birds singing in the nearby trees. My car was parked 2 blocks away, loaded with a few boxes I had moved bit by bit over the last week. The engine started quietly, and I drove away without looking back. Without facing the house, there was no need for one last look. I had already memorized every detail of what I was leaving behind. As I drove across town to my new apartment, an unexpected lightness began to replace the weight in my chest. It wasn't the ending I had imagined for us, but it was an ending I had chosen and not something that simply happened to me. There was power in that choice. A reclamation of my autonomy after months of being slowly erased within my own marriage. I arrived at the new building just as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The apartment was simple, with basic furniture, white walls. Without the warmth or personality of the house I had just left, but it was mine, a blank canvas, a chance to rebuild without the constant undermining of my value. I placed the suitcase in the bedroom and, out of habit, picked up my phone. No messages, no missed calls. She was surely still enjoying her weekend away, completely oblivious to the fact that her life had just fundamentally changed. The disconnect between her reality at that moment and what awaited her created a strange feeling in my stomach. It wasn't satisfaction or revenge, but something more complex. A mix of sadness for what was lost and determination for what needed to happen. I silenced the phone and put it in a drawer. Whatever reaction would come when she returned home the next night, I wouldn't witness it directly. The conversation we needed to have would happen, but on different terms than before, with no more contempt, no more devaluation, no more pretending we were still partners when we had clearly become strangers. As night fell on my first night of this new chapter, I realized I had been holding my breath for months, waiting for something to change. Now I could finally exhale. The call started on Sunday at 6:42 p.m. I watched the phone light up repeatedly with her name on the screen. 12 missed calls in the first hour alone. I had anticipated anger, confusion, maybe even relief, but the frequency indicated panic. Between the calls came the text messages, their tone changing rapidly. Is this some kind of joke? Where are you? Answer the phone. You can't just leave like this. We need to talk now. Please come home. We can work this out. I replied only once with a simple message. Please contact my lawyer for any inquiries. Then I silenced notifications from her number. This wasn't coldness. It was self-preservation. Any direct communication would drag me back into the emotional whirlwind I had just escaped. Monday brought the financial reality. My lawyer forwarded emails from her, first demanding access to our accounts, then expressing shock upon discovering they had been divided equally. Apparently, she tried to withdraw money and found exactly half of what she expected. Not emptied, not stolen, just divided with mathematical precision. On Tuesday, the tone shifted from outrage to disbelief. "I didn't think you were serious," she wrote in an email my lawyer shared. "This isn't like you." The irony was not lost on me. After months of treating me as irrelevant, she suddenly claimed to be an expert on my character and intentions. Wednesday brought the first bills, automatic notices for the mortgage, utilities, and the credit card that would now fall entirely on her. The careful financial architecture I had maintained for years, largely invisible to her. Despite her claims that she was the one handling the important things, was now revealing itself in its absence. A week after my departure, her mother called. I answered out of respect for the woman who had always been kind to me. "She's a mess," her mother said bluntly. "She didn't see it coming." "That's the problem," I replied quietly. She stopped seeing me altogether. The conversation was brief but revealing. According to her mother, she always portrayed our marriage as perfect to the family, never mentioning the growing contempt for me or our partnership. The public persona of a strong, independent woman apparently didn't extend to family honesty. 10 days after my departure, the first late payment notice arrived at our old house. She forwarded it to my lawyer with a single question: "Are you going to let everything we built fall apart?" My lawyer's response was professionally crafted, but essentially said, "You built this reality where you didn't need him. Now live it fully." 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected package in my office. Inside was my wedding ring with a note. "You forgot this." I placed the ring in my desk drawer, struck by the complete misunderstanding of my actions. The ring hadn't been forgotten. It had been left behind on purpose. In the third week came the financial escalation. She had discovered that maintaining our lifestyle alone was a challenge. Her salary alone, despite the promotion, wasn't enough to sustain the mortgage that seemed reasonable when split between two incomes. The car payment, which she insisted we could afford for the new luxury vehicle, suddenly became a burden. A mutual friend got in touch. Concerned. "She's telling everyone you abandoned her. Without warning," he said cautiously, "that you left her drowning in debt." I thanked him for the information, but offered no alternative version. The truth would emerge organically through actions and not words. A month after my departure, her lawyer contacted mine. The tone had changed drastically. The independent woman, who needed nothing from me, was now requesting temporary support while she adjusted to her new circumstances. My lawyer suggested offering a one-time settlement instead of ongoing payments. I agreed, stipulating a fair but not excessive amount. 6 weeks later, I ran into her unexpectedly at our old coffee shop. She looked different. Her appearance, once carefully maintained, now showed subtle signs of wear. Our eyes met for an instant before she hastily gathered her things and left without ordering. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car for a few minutes, her head bowed over the steering wheel. That night, a more subdued email arrived, sent through my lawyer. I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't see the way I was treating you. For the first time since my departure, I felt something more than detachment. Not regret for leaving, but sadness for what had been lost. A connection that was once meaningful to both of us. The practical consequences continued to unfold. She put the house up for sale, unable to maintain it alone. The social media posts about embracing change and new beginnings contrasted sharply with the increasingly desperate financial inquiries that came through the lawyers. The independent life she had proclaimed with such confidence turned out to be more expensive than expected. 2 months after I left, I received the final confirmation of what I had always suspected. The bills had come due, and the strong, independent woman had discovered the true cost of being completely alone. 6 months passed like a long, slow exhale. The divorce was finalized with surprising efficiency. She ended up taking the path of least resistance, accepting the equal division I had proposed from the start. Our house was sold, though for less than we had hoped. According to my lawyer, she moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and took on a different role at her company. Our lives, once intimately intertwined, now existed on separate planes. I adapted to the new reality with unexpected ease. The apartment slowly went from being a temporary refuge to a real home. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the final, difficult months of my marriage. My work flourished, no longer overshadowed by domestic concerns. The weight I had carried for so long, the constant effort to maintain a relationship with someone who no longer valued it, dissipated, allowing me to rediscover parts of myself that had been smothered. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. "It's me. Can we meet just to talk?" I stared at the message for a long time, conflicting emotions surfacing, curiosity, weariness, a distant echo of the connection we once shared. After careful consideration, I agreed to have coffee in a neutral place. She arrived on time, a characteristic I always admired. The confident posture that marked the last months of our marriage was gone, replaced by a more subdued demeanor. She looked well, but different. The expensive designer clothes had given way to simpler pieces. The elaborate hairstyle was replaced by a more practical cut. "Thanks for coming," she said as we sat across from each other, steam rising from our mugs. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I admitted. An awkward silence stretched between us before she spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot, and I've been in therapy," she added with a humorless laugh. "I discovered there's a difference between true independence and just pushing people away to prove a point." I listened, but didn't offer easy forgiveness. The pain she caused had been too deep, too deliberate to be erased with a simple acknowledgement. My therapist asked me when things changed. She continued, slowly turning her mug. "When did I start treating you that way?" At first, I couldn't pinpoint it, but then I realized it started after the promotion. I was the only woman in senior management. They were always commenting that I needed to be tougher, more assertive. Somehow that morphed into the idea that I needed to reject anything that looked like dependence, even our marriage. "Yes," I replied quietly. Her eyes met mine directly. I confused being strong with being harsh, independence with isolation. She paused. "I'm not asking for a reconciliation. That ship has sailed and I understand why. I just wanted you to know that I see what I did now, who I became. And I'm sorry." The apology hung between us, sincere but unable to rewrite history. We talked for another hour, not about reconciliation, but about closure. She shared that the independent woman identity had crumbled a few weeks after my departure, forcing a painful reckoning with her own reliance on others, not just financially, but emotionally and practically as well. The colleagues who had applauded her dismissive comments about marriage disappeared when she actually needed support. As our conversation neared its end, she hesitated before asking, "Are you seeing someone?" "Yes," I replied, "someone who values partnership instead of seeing it as weakness." I didn't go into detail. My new relationship was still being built, marked by mutual respect and appreciation, qualities I now recognized as non-negotiable. A flicker of regret crossed her face before she composed herself. "You deserve it. You always did." We said goodbye without dramatic declarations or promises to keep in touch. Some chapters are meant to be closed completely. 3 weeks later, I received a small package, a book I had mentioned wanting to read during our coffee meeting, accompanied by a simple note. "Thanks for the lesson on true independence. It's not about not needing anyone. It's about being whole enough to choose interdependence wisely." The irony was not lost on me. Her journey to genuine strength only began after losing the partnership she had devalued. My own independence was reclaimed not through grand declarations, but by the quiet dignity of walking away from someone who couldn't see my value. As I placed the book on the shelf, I reflected on the strange symmetry of our story. She had proclaimed independence while desperately needing support. I sought partnership and ended up finding freedom in solitude. We both found what we needed, just not in the way we expected. The strong, independent woman she claimed to be was perhaps finally emerging, not through declarations or contempt, but through the hard-won wisdom that comes from facing the consequences of one's own choices. As for me, I discovered that true strength sometimes looks like walking away.